Welcome to Building My Legacy podcast. This podcast is designed for leaders and entrepreneurs who want to leave a legacy and will provide strategies that focus upon key elements for legacy creation, determining your desired impact and its benefit, increasing your legacy's reach by engaging key stakeholders, planning, prioritizing, and executing. Here's your host, Dr. Lois Sonstegard.
Welcome, everybody, to today's Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me today Chris Arnold. Chris Arnold has, I think, the lifestyle that I hear every socialpreneur wanting to have, and that is to live in Mexico and work. I don't know that he's sitting on a beach, and I don't see him sitting with a laptop on sand. But anyway, he has figured out how to have a life and to do it living where he wants to live. He is part of COSA Investments, and I'm going to let you, Chris, speak about all the different things that you are involved in. Real estate is one of those. You've got a wholesale investment company, I believe, and you have also a fascinating company called Multipliers Mastermind. So let's leave that one to be finished, and let's begin with the companies that you're in. And how you got into doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on today. Really excited to come in and just add some value to everyone that's listening today. So I actually got my start 15 years ago in real estate. For me, I have viewed business always as a vehicle and a vehicle for freedom. But I know a lot of people throw out that word, but there are kind of four, what I would say, facets of freedom that have always really been important to me. I want freedom of time. I want freedom of resources. I want freedom of location, and I want freedom of thought. Because what I realized was if you could set up business to really support those four freedoms, and you have a cause in which you are absolutely passionate about, that puts you in a very advanced position of freedom to be able to go out and quickly do the things that you're passionate about. I see a lot of people, I kind of say there are people that have profit and they don't really have any purpose. And so what you can see there is kind of a lot of emptiness and lack of fulfillment. And then there are people that have very high levels of purpose, but there's no profit. And so what I see there is really a level of frustration because there is a desire to go and impact something greater than themselves, but the challenge is they don't have the money to do it. So for me, utilizing business was the ability to bring both profit and purpose together. And what I believe you find in the middle of that is social entrepreneurship, which I'm a big believer in, and utilizing the private sector being business to solve some of the problems that are out there, rather than a lot of times, relying on government to be responsible for solving all of those social issues. So I got into real estate because that was the best vehicle that I saw. Again, I was 25 years old at the time. I didn't know much about business. I had read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think that book affected our entire generation, but it made sense to me. And I said, if I'm going to pick a vehicle, I'm going to do that. And so after 15 years, I've been everything through. I have a real estate brokerage. I had scaled that up doing traditional real estate and building out a team. I've got an investment company doing traditional single family investment as well in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I'm also, of course, what I would call in the info marketing space. So there's a company that I purchased in which we do that. And then lastly, and you touched on it, the biggest passion that I have and really my cause is Multipliers Brotherhood, which is the thing that gets me out of the bed most each morning.
Okay, so before we get into the Multiplier Mastermind, you also use radio as your medium for getting your voice out there. Talk a little bit about that, because it's not what we normally think about. We think about Facebook, we think about Twitter, we think about LinkedIn, and radio is sort of like on the third or fourth page.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're listening and you are, looking at real estate, or maybe you are tinkering around with maybe building a rental portfolio so that you can get that passive income. One of the things that we all have in common as real estate investors is that we have to generate what we would call motivated seller leads, people that need to sell a property quickly. They want a convenient sell, cash as is. And so that creates a win-win between the investor and the seller, because the seller gets out quickly, and then we are able to come in, and because we're providing that service, we buy at a discount. And so where do you find those type of people? And what a lot of people have overlooked, particularly with how tech, has developed over time, and it's, the next thing is always tech related, like what is cutting edge. But what's been overlooked is that the primary source where real estate deals are coming from across the country in the US are people over the age of 55. So for anyone that's an investor, and I can do this for myself, if you go pull that data and you go, what is the demographic in which most of my deals come from? They come from people over the age of 55. And now, obviously, with the baby boomer generation where it's at, there's going to be an even higher increase of properties that are, hey, I don't want to manage this rental property anymore, or different situations that create that. So a lot of people, they want to do the cutting edge thing, but what they realize is people over the age of 55 don't have those habits. They have one really key habit that we have really hit on, and that is the fact that they listen to radio. If you kind of think back to, your parents or your grandparents right now, I can tell you this, most of them, if not all for the most part, do not stream music. They do not have Spotify downloaded on their phone. They were raised where you get in a car and you turn on the local station, whether that be AM for talk radio or FM for whatever particular genre of music that they like. And so what we have found is it's been one of the most powerful ways to get in front of that audience, to be able to generate those motivated seller leads. And so what we kind of call it is, I call it the marketing channel that everyone knows about, but nobody's using. Radio has been around forever, but the application of it has what's been overlooked. And so most of the investment properties that we get actually come through the channel of radio.
Well, that's amazing. And I think so what I'm hearing is, look at the demographics. There's certain demographics for whom that is particularly useful. And with your investment group for real estate at 55, 50, radio is great.
Absolutely. 100%. And a couple of things you have to realize about radio. With that generation, there's a lot of trust in that medium. So, a lot of people will do what I call spam-based approach marketing when it comes to real estate. They'll do things like text blasting or ringless voicemail or direct mail. And yeah, that generates leads, but a lot of times those people are reaching out because they have to, but they really don't trust you. When someone from that generation hears you on the radio, there's two things that you get. You get celebrity status. Because think about it, there's something psychological that happens in all of our minds when people are on mass media, whether that be radio or television or social media or even podcasts. And so all of a sudden, you're building a really strong brand and reputation. So when that person calls you, they're actually even amazed that you pick up the phone. They're just expecting someone else to. And this happens to us. We all have that attorney that lives in our town that's got a few billboards. We see him on TV and radio. And I guarantee you, if you're out with a friend and you see that attorney, you're going to, look over at your friend and go, hey, look, that's that attorney that we always see. And so that's human nature. We elevate people that somehow figure out a way to get on mass media. And then what follows that is instant credibility. And we know with that generation, a lot of times, still that belief of look me in the eye, belly to belly, kind of shake my hand. There's that level of trust. And so what we have found is when you advertise on radio and you get contacted by someone, you're way down that road on the know you, like you, trust you piece already, because they think you're a celebrity. And here's what they think to themselves. If he or she's on radio, they must know what they're talking about, because people on radio are people that are experts. And that is the overall assumption that they make.
So you have your own radio station. Is that correct?
Yeah, we use multiple radio stations. So yeah,
Okay.
we work with about 7 different radio stations within the DFW market.
Got it. Wow, good for you. What a fun new thing to have learned and for our audience to think about. So I want to move a little bit, shift our focus from all of what you've done. One of the things that you've begun looking at is what you call the Multipliers Brotherhood. Tell us a little bit about that. Why did you get into that? And what were you hoping to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you go back when I started business, I had always started with the purpose of wanting it to impact something. I think for a lot of us, we have a desire to fulfill what we would call our unique contribution or our legacy. But when you're young, you might have a desire to do that, but not really know what it is. So what I tell a lot of people is you just got to get off the bench and just start heading down the road. And so I knew that I wanted to utilize real estate to impact something, but I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew it was the right vehicle. And so I knew that over time that would come to me. And so, I think for a lot of us, and I'll use Bob Buford's language, the first part of our life, particularly as young men and women, is that success side, right? We have to establish ourselves, if we're married, let's say have kids, we need to provide for our families first. We have to get those things done before we can kind of look past our own lives to the needs of other people. And so that transition is really at a particular time in our lives, which is middle age, where, we've done the success thing and we want to move over to the significance piece. And that's a journey that a lot of us go to. And Bob Buford kind of calls that halftime. It's like, what is more success for me at this point? This isn't really providing for me internally what it used to. Like I want more. And so because I chose real estate, I just threw a time out there. There wasn't anything particular, but I said 10 years. I will put my head down and become the absolute best entrepreneur that I can be for 10 years. And again, I did always little things, homeless ministry and juvenile detention center ministry, just kind of different stuff like that. I never wanted to get my hand, but it wasn't my primary focus when I woke up every day. And so after 10 years, I had really marked that in my mind. And so at that time, I told a buddy, hey, we're going to show up every Saturday morning. We're going to have a cup of coffee until we figure out what this next piece is for us. And so it took 9 months. And Lois, I mean, you would imagine the amount of causes and things that we looked at and how we could utilize business to impact the world. But through that time,
the amount of coffee you drank, actually.
Yeah, cappuccinos. That was always cappuccinos and sometimes lattes if we wanted to change it up. So yeah, a lot of coffees to get there. And so after that, what was birthed from that was this concept of Multipliers Brotherhood. And so I tell a lot of people, if you're on that legacy journey, it can be frustrating to not know exactly what it is. But I think a lot of times it's revealed in the right time when we're ready for it. And I got to be honest with you, I wasn't ready to carry on what this vision is because I just, at that point, being young and, let's say 5 years into my career, I just wasn't the man that could carry that type of baton and that responsibility. I needed to mature and grow. And I needed to learn to lead myself before I could lead these other men in Multipliers. So
tell us, what is it?
Yeah.
Great name. So, what is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's what I tell you, what it is by telling you the problem that we're solving. So if you're talking with entrepreneurs, particularly men, because men struggle with having meaningful relationships a lot more than women. Women are much more natural at connecting with other women. What I will tell you is I see as one of the biggest problems for entrepreneurs is isolation. So here's what happens. I decide to step out, become an entrepreneur, and then I start to become successful. And all of a sudden, my influence grows, my income grows, my thinking grows. All of a sudden, I began to leave behind a lot of the people that I grew up with. And so all of a sudden, when I begin to have challenges, I go, man, my friends are still working a 9 to 5. Like, they're going to laugh if I complain about what I'm struggling with. And like, what do you complain about? I'm the one that has to swipe a clock every day. I mean, you own your business, you're living the dream, right? And there are boundaries with employees. There are only so many things that you can open up with employees. There are healthy boundaries there. And for a man, you can only dump so much on your wife. And there's only so much she can understand, particularly if she's not an entrepreneur. So what I find for men is they just become more and more isolated. And they have a desire to continue to scale this mountain. But as the terrain gets steeper and the altitude gets thinner, they just find themselves being more and more alone as they're scaling this mountain. And so what happens over time is stress kicks in, because the higher you go, the more challenges you get, the harder it becomes. And so they begin to self-medicate to deal with it, because they don't have anyone to talk to about these issues. And so I see the same things with entrepreneurs. We tend to have very excessive personalities. That's what makes us great entrepreneurs. Most of us got in a lot of trouble when we were kids. And so I see a lot of what I would call alcohol and drug use. We see everything from porn addictions to extramarital affairs to what I would call lifestyle living, to where I'm going to try to kind of numb what I feel by these, incredible experiences and travel and so forth. And so at that point, all of a sudden you have a man who's at a very high level with tons of employees, tons of followers. And now here comes the shame, right? I made a mistake. I stepped outside of my character, and I know it. And so now there's shame. But the problem is, we know we all make mistakes. There's no one to talk to. And so the only thing a guy can do at that point is just stuff and suppress those emotions, kind of put on the mask. But as one of my coaches say, it's like holding a beach ball underwater. You can only do it for so long. And so what we know because of that is that mask will crack. And statistically, 2 out of 3 entrepreneurs will fail to finish the race. I don't know about you, Lois, but knowing that leaders change the world, and 2 out of 3 will fail because either they will make a moral misstep that will disqualify them from the leadership race, or they will burn themselves out. You have a lot of problems, a lot of causes, a lot of things in this world that are not being changed simply because you had men who had no other men that they could open up with about the difficult things of being an entrepreneur. So that's what Multipliers Brother is. We provide a safe environment for the top real estate. We serve the top 5% of real estate investors, influencers in the US. And we provide an environment where those guys know that I have other brothers that know what I'm going through, that can relate with the challenges I have. And again, we encourage and we support that vulnerability piece. And most important, we're equipped to deal with whatever comes out via that vulnerability. So when that guy talks about something that he has never told anyone else, which takes a lot of courage for a man to do in front of a lot of other men, then we are able to step in, love that brother, and make sure that we help him get back up on his feet and back into the game of leadership. And that is really the heart and vision of what Multipliers is.
So, Chris, there's a lot of what people do when it comes to having things that are not going well in their life, right? One of the things that I think people often do is, let me just clean up my mess a little bit, then I'll come get help. And then you can fix the not so bad parts, but we'll have it together and we'll do it faster. So there's that piece where I got to do it, fix it, get it better so I can get help. And there's also that willingness to admit I'm in trouble. So there's, I think, 2 pieces that go with that. So how do you get people's ear and get them so that they're ready to come to you?
Yeah. So what's been interesting is when you're dealing with very high level entrepreneurs, I can tell you that they realize that failure at that point is not a lack of business strategy. At that level, when you're dealing with high level A players, they realize already at that point that the only thing that's going to get in their way at this point is them. They realize that what is threatening them is the fact that they're going to implode at some point. So that is an understanding that entrepreneurs at that level already instinctively understand. And then the flip side of that is what I have found interviewing hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs for Multipliers, is that there is a deep craving for men to have brotherhood. Now, they might describe differently what they need, but at the end of the day, what I have been amazed is it's not that we need to plant this hunger or this realization in men. They want brotherhood. The challenge is they just don't know what it looks like. It's like, I know what I need. I just don't know where to find it. And I don't actually know that I've ever experienced it. Or I get men that experienced it for a short term. Maybe it was a community in college or some particular time in their life. And they have struggled to refine something at that level again. And so men are hungry and honestly at a point to where they want this. And once given that environment and putting them in that place, it comes out, all of that. There's a high level of willingness. And I'm not speaking for all men. I know there's some men that listen, and this is what I hear the same thing. Well, I don't really do the feelings thing. That's usually the way that they say it, right? That's just not me, man. The whole vulnerability thing's not me. I just got to be honest with you. A leader who's not willing to look at his stuff is not going to last very long. You're just not. And what we're dealing with, particularly as you start to get in your 40s and 50s, is you're dealing at that point with all the parental social conditioning that you went through, whatever your father said at you at age 5, or whatever some kids said at you in junior high. We never deal with that stuff as men, and we do pretty good in our 20s and early 30s. But eventually all of a sudden it starts coming out. But men don't connect the dots of, why am I behaving this way? Why do I have anger issues? All of these type of things. And what you're dealing with is a lot of historical stuff that men never really took the time to go in and excavate and really deal with. And so that's a big piece of what we do, is getting back into the history of the men and making sure there's healing going all the way back to childhood.
So your mastermind groups, are they virtual?
No, it's a combination of both, but we actually meet in Tulum, Mexico, where I live. So that's about an hour and a half south of Cancun, 45 minutes south of Playa. Here's what I can tell you about entrepreneurs. We thrive off adventure. So the last thing we want to do is go sit in a Hilton hotel with, bad carpet and eat, hotel sandwiches, which is where most of events take place. I still don't understand this if you're dealing with entrepreneurs. So no, I believe that change happens on overlooking the ocean, on a mountaintop. There's some experience that causes us to unplug. And that's usually where we kind of hear that voice or, find that thing that we're looking for. So Multipliers is built on a very high experiential piece because men need that. You're more likely to have a vulnerable conversation sitting with a few guys, looking up at the stars while your feet are in the sand with a little bit of a fire, smoking some stogies. That's what works for men. We need that buffer. We need that place, but you put men in that type of environment around a fire pit with some stogies, you'll be amazed at how vulnerable it gets. And so you have to create the right settings for men. That's hard to do that in a ballroom in some random city that they never wanted to go to in the first place in the US. So
how large are your mastermind groups?
How what?
How large are they? How many people come are part
of we're capped at 50. So I believe that there is a difference between a mastermind and a brotherhood. I see a lot of masterminds in the name of revenue and wanting to get, quantity will grow to about 150. What I have found is that's not really brotherhood. You've moved over to a conference level. And so for us, without losing the charm of what it is, the ability for our men to know all of their stories and to have deep, meaningful relationships, I think you reach saturation point on 50 men within a community.
Got it. Our time is almost up, Chris. And so I just want to ask you, what have we missed? that is important for our audience to think about and to know?
I think we touched on everything. What I would tell particularly men that are listening, and women as well, but as I mentioned, women do this much better than we do as men. I would tell you, if you're on some type of journey, whether you're an entrepreneur or still working a 9 to 5, I will tell you that you cannot get to clarity alone. You will not navigate and accomplish the things that you want in life being a lone wolf. It just doesn't work. You're not an island. You need other men around you with similar core values that have your back. And so I'm telling you that out of doing what I do and being in the real estate now for 15 years, when I see men that are isolated, I know what's coming. It might be a year from now, it might be 5 years from now, but I know that eventually that person's going to stumble and make a decision that costs them everything. I mean, that's what's so hard, Lois. You can spend 20 years building an empire, and you can make one decision to topple it all. One decision can cost you 20 years of work, and that's heartbreaking to watch. So absolutely.
Chris, thank you so much. And for those of you who are listening, we will have information about Chris in the show notes, and we encourage you to get in contact with him. If any of you are feeling those things that Chris is talking about of isolation and are looking for a group, particularly if you're in real estate, please connect with him. And if you have any trouble getting a hold of him, let us know. We'll be glad to get you in contact. So Chris, thank you so much.
Absolutely. And if you're listening, sometimes I'm too lazy to go to show notes. I know entrepreneurs. So it's like, just tell me. So if the whole Brotherhood piece resonated with you, you can check us out at multipliersbrotherhood.com. And if the whole thing about radio going, man, I'm a real estate investor, that just totally got my mind going. You can get more info at wholesalinginc.com/REI radio. Again, wholesalinginc.com/REI radio. So
wonderful. Thanks so much, Chris. And for those of you who are listening to Building My Legacy podcast, thank you. And remember to visit our website at Build Tomorrow with the number 2 and our social media sites as well. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
You've been listening to Building My Legacy podcast with Dr. Lois Sonstegard. To book your appointment with Dr. Sonstegard, visit www.buildtomorrow.com.